I don't have a problem standing up to somebody who was, working on season 7 of Celebrity Apprentice when I was packing my bags for Afghanistan. But at the end of the day, it's not about him.
Do you have a question? Do you think he should have served in Vietnam?
Well, I have a pretty dim view of his decision to use his privileged status to fake a disability in order to avoid serving in Vietnam.
He served in Afghanistan, so he would know. Joining our conversation is former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, former presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg. As we said, he's an Afghanistan war veteran. I spoke to Chasten at the beginning of the week, so this is a perfect Buttigieg family week for me. And I wish I was getting to talk to you under happier circumstances, but just your reaction to a commander-in-chief. And I worked for a president whose policies were very controversial, put extraordinary strain on military families in this country. But behind closed doors, he couldn't spend time with military families and talk about military families without weeping, with the power of emotion and pride and just the joy and the gift that it was to get to be around them. I understand President Obama was deeply moved by his time with veterans and with active duty military. Most presidents love when they get to travel to war zones to thank people and travel to bases and thank their families. It is just so stunningly abnormal to loathe the military if you're a president of this country.
The president finally said something that was true when he said, "I don't get it." He clearly doesn't. He doesn't understand what service is about. He's shown this long before he was president. He showed it when he avoided serving, and he's shown it ever since. But still, even after all of the disrespect that he's shown for military, for prisoners of war, for Gold Star parents, I have to say, even though it's not 1,000% surprising, there is something shocking about him just coming out and saying that he thinks those who serve are suckers and losers. And I feel that reverberating among my friends who serve and their family members, to say nothing of the pain that this causes for those who lost somebody. And a president who has this attitude about those who are captured should not be allowed within a 1-mile radius of a POW flag, because obviously he doesn't get it.
Can you tell me about some of those conversations with families or people who have served?
Well, the way my chats go with people I served with, most of them are things I probably can't repeat on television. There's a lot of swear words going around the military community right now. Look, this is, right? I'm struggling to find the words right now because this goes so deep. And it cuts across, by the way, any kind of political alignment. You don't have to be a Democrat to think this is messed up for the person with whom we trust our lives as a whole country, but especially those who are in uniform, to show this kind of attitude. And yet, are we totally surprised? And what does it tell us that the generals who were around for this, who were his, in the case of Secretary Mattis, his appointee, are silent right now? They obviously cannot stir themselves to defend this president. And that's a reminder about the kind of person who would be making life and death decisions for 4 more years if he gets reelected. It's why we need somebody like Joe Biden who doesn't have to use his imagination to know what it feels like to have a loved one go off to war because his son served in Iraq.
I want to ask you about how you and Joe Biden and Jill Biden make this argument to the country. Obviously, Donald Trump's failures around the coronavirus pandemic are so massive, so undeniable. They stare all of us in the face as we look for a mask before we walk into a Walmart or however we go about our lives. It's all impacted by his failures. But this would seem to change the calculation and require the Biden campaign to be able to talk about just a failure to protect all of us, not just everyone at risk from the pandemic, but the men and women of the military. If they have a commander-in-chief who doesn't understand why we go look for people killed in action and wounded in action or prisoners of war, could be a threat to the military.
Absolutely. Think about what this does to morale, but also think about what it means that the man who's in that situation room, perhaps making decisions we don't even know about concerning those who have been captured, actually harbors these attitudes, some of which we've known about for some time, by the way. This just brings it to a new low. And so the conversation I think we need to have in particular is with folks who may have just voted Republican for their whole lives because that's what's normal in their community. And in particular, that's what they have expected that, military families would do. And I think it's very revealing that even before these shocking revelations, news has come out that the president has lost the support of military members and their families. Again, you don't have to be a diehard Democrat. We got to be reaching out to everybody, saying, look, maybe you voted Republican your whole life, but think of it this way. Years from now, if you're a Republican, if you're a rock-ribbed Republican, years from now, when you're explaining these years to your grandkids, do you want, when they ask you, were you a John McCain kind of Republican or were you a Donald Trump kind of Republican? What side did you choose? And you can't be both. So that's why we see so many Republicans. Most recently, Governor Snyder in Michigan, just the latest in a chorus of Republicans saying, this far but no further.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.